Stella Gray was no stranger to hard work. Each morning, she rose before dawn, slipping into her uniform, a crisp, white apron over plain clothes, and headed to the hotel where she spent her days polishing floors and changing sheets. Her job, though exhausting, was one she took pride in. But today wasn't about fresh linens or dust-free mantles. Today, Stella had saved enough to witness her dream up close, a private aviation exhibit, a world filled with the sleek lines of luxury jets and the promise of adventures beyond the horizon. With her heart racing as fast as the planes she longed to see, Stella arrived at the exhibit in her best thrift store outfit. A floral dress that, while outdated, was pressed to perfection, and a pair of sensible shoes, her scrimped savings in her worn tote bag. Despite feeling a twinge of self-consciousness among the well-heeled attendees, her excitement was palpable. The venue was a marvel, gleaming aircraft under vast skylights, their exteriors so polished they mirrored the crowd's grandeur. Stella's senses were overwhelmed by the elegant scent of rich leather interiors and the soft hum of ambient music accompanying whispered conversations. However, her euphoria faced a jarring halt when she approached a well-groomed attendant, whose name badge simply read, Greg. Full of genuine curiosity, Stella asked about the jet's safety features, always a pragmatic thinker. Greg's sneer was swift. "Shouldn't you be scrubbing floors somewhere?" he shot back, loudly enough for others to hear. Laughter erupted nearby, and Stella felt it like a physical blow, her cheeks burning with humiliation. In that moment, among the laughter and dismissive glances, Stella felt like she didn't belong, her dreams slipping away on the winds of their derision. Stella's cheeks burned scarlet as she turned away from the laughter that rippled through the crowd. Somewhere, beyond the polished veneer of wealth and privilege, she sensed a few pairs of eyes that lingered with discomfort at her predicament, but none brave enough to offer her a whisper of solidarity. Instead, she was engulfed by a sea of judgmental stares and amused snickers, her excitement extinguished by the sharp edges of derision. With a practiced air of dignity, she straightened her shoulders and made her way toward the exit. She didn't run; running would have been a concession to the shame squeezing her heart. Instead, in a quiet, resolute stride, she slipped through the grand doorway, her steps echoing the weight of a battle she hadn't anticipated fighting. Outside, the world seemed to sway slightly before her eyes, the grandiosity of the event already feeling like a distant dream. Stella found a bench in a small adjoining park, away from the opulence and the gathering storm of elite chatter. Sitting with her tote bag clutched tightly to her chest, she drew a deep, shaky breath and tried to muster the strength she had always relied upon. The bench's cold would seep through her dress, a bite of reality against the fabric. Her mind, however, wandered backward through the years, tracing the path that brought her here. Back to the sleepless nights and early mornings of scrubbing stairwells and tidying guest rooms. Back to tiny sacrifices that accumulated like raindrops until they could fill an ocean. Every skipped meal, every frugality, was meant for this moment, a chance to see something grand, something different. But the memory of her father's grizzled hand, warm and steady as it pointed out the soaring planes at a local airshow, tugged strongest at her heart. Stella remembered the spark in her young eyes as the planes roared above, crossing the skies with an intimidating ease. Her father had worked as a mechanic, his understanding of machinery instilling in her a curiosity for how things worked and a love for flight, although their family never had the means to indulge such a hobby. As the vision of that childhood wonder began to fade into adulthood responsibility, Stella promised herself that one day she would chase those silver wings. She hadn't chased the daydream of private aviation for the sheer luxury of private travel, but a simple longing to be near those gleaming marvels once more. This small joy was supposed to be hers today, a reward after years of toil. Yet here she sat, devastated by the cruel reality of class scorn, laid out in the dismissive laugh of a privileged stranger. Greg's voice continued to echo in her mind, an unwelcome replay, affirming her outsider status in a world that had seemed momentarily accessible. But there was something else simmering there, within the ache of that bruise, a flicker of the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of life. Hers was not a world of ostentation, but of resilience. She knew what it meant to endure and persevere in silence, and she drew on that wellspring now, soaking in the solitude of the bench like she might soak in sunlight. Foresight began replacing humiliation, tracing paths of possibility and retaining pride in her own capability and integrity. Stella couldn't change Greg's disdain nor erase the scene, but she wouldn't let it define her stay in this day. Her life had been a tapestry of setbacks, patched together with moments of quiet triumph. Reflecting on these thoughts, Stella knew she would not grovel for acceptance at a venue that cared so little for hers. In that subtle acceptance, sorrow began to give way to a simmering resolve. She had come here to witness beauty and realization, not its superficial varnishing. Drawing back to the present, Stella stood slowly, the resolve firming the line of her shoulders as she took a deep breath of crisp afternoon air. Her efforts, her dreams were her own. It was the exhibit and those like Greg who had failed to recognize the value of modest grace and quiet aspiration. Even as painful memories still clung, electricity in her bones urged her forth. She had given herself this day, and though her initial plan was dashed, she could still claim a moment of her own. Stella knew she needed the strength more than comfort. With new clarity, she lifted her chin and turned toward the path that led away from the elegant chaos, her stride no longer shackled by the shame imposed by someone else's judgment. She would not allow a single dismissive sneer to overshadow the woman she had become, the fights she had already won beyond anyone else's reckoning. As Stella walked away from the echoes of privileged ignorance, she couldn't help but glance back at the grandiose venue. It shimmered under the sun, a symbol of both luxury and exclusion. Her eyes narrowed with a grim understanding. Appearance could mask negligence. She had experienced that enough in her line of work to recognize when things weren't quite right. What Stella didn't know was just how pivotal this moment would be. Her quiet reflection, combined with a shift in perspective, would soon manifest not in dreams desecrated but potentially, lives unwittingly preserved. Her resolve unfolded almost palpably in the crisp, clear air, as she resolved to transform this rebuke into a renewed truth she could hold. Despite her resolve, Stella's heart still felt heavy as she walked away from the aviation exhibit. She kept her gaze forward, trying to shake off the sting of public ridicule. But as she crossed the busy thoroughfare to continue her walk towards the city center, something caught her attention from the corner of her eye. The side entrance stood there, almost hidden between two grandiose building wings. The place bustled with staff moving in and out, carrying boxes and tools. Stella paused, noticing something strange. Her trained housekeeper eyes did not miss details. A padlocked fire exit, unmistakably marked with vibrant emergency signage, stood out glaringly against safety protocols she was sure even a prestigious venue should adhere to. Stella hesitated momentarily, her natural inclination to avoid drawing attention to herself competing with an inherent conviction that something wasn't right. There was a responsibility she felt, as someone who had often worked behind the scenes where safety took precedence, not only for the staff but also for patrons. As she craned her neck for a closer look, her ears picked up snippets of conversation from two staff members nearby. They were engrossed in discussion, seemingly oblivious to her presence on the periphery. One, a young man in his 20s, complained in low tones to an older colleague about how they hadn't done proper safety checks in over a year. "These certifications are more about pomp than procedure in a place like this," he scoffed, shaking his head. Stella's brow furrowed. The neglect seemed careless, almost deliberate, prioritizing aesthetics over function, much like her earlier interaction. She fished out her phone, feeling a moral obligation override the remnants of her anger and humiliation. She clicked a few photos of the padlocked fire exit and discreetly recorded the conversation. The evidence now stored on her phone, Stella's mind whirred with cautious determination. She considered her next move carefully. These observations could help avert potential disaster. The hotel where she worked had stringent safety protocols, underscoring this same principle. Here, the revered venue seemed to falter on its polished promise. Determined to act, Stella sat at a cafe a block away, her heartbeat a steady reminder of urgency and significance. She pulled out a napkin, jotting down the email address she found online for the Aviation Safety Authority, compiling her observations with the photos and recordings. The message was concise, highlighting the emergency exit barricade and referencing the staff's unguarded conversation. Before she allowed herself a moment to rethink, she hit send. Stella sipped her coffee with renewed purpose. Memories of the day's earlier shame began fading under the weight of her decision. She knew her actions were right, but a sliver of fear remained, uncertainty about how her email would be received, if it would lead to any change, or if she had done enough. Still, the thought of having potentially safeguarded someone else from harm buoyed her spirit. A subtle transformation began in Stella as the morning unfolded into afternoon. Each step she took was lighter, less burdened by the pain of earlier events. She considered heading home but found herself meandering through city streets that felt unexpectedly open and welcoming after her small act of defiance. She passed shop windows, her reflection a testament to the resilience within her that neither elegance nor insult could break. Stopping at a crosswalk, an unmistakable sound drew her attention. A child, no older than 6 or 7, tugged at his mother's hand, eyes wide toward the sky. Above them, the sky briefly claimed the attention of all below as an airplane soared overhead, engines roaring with the promise of possibilities unseen. Stella couldn't help but smile at the child's awe, the beginnings of a dream as earnest as hers once was. It was reaffirming, glimpsing herself in the boy's wonder-struck face. He mirrored the passion she felt, the reason she had come to the exhibit in the first place. A journey rudely interrupted but not ended. She was reminded of how passions could ignite future paths, new wings to follow on one's terms, not defined by eligibility assigned by others. By the time Stella returned to her small apartment that evening, a sense of accomplishment had replaced doubts and shadows of the day. The space felt cozy and grounding, a reminder of her own world that, while unembellished, offered authenticity. She tidied out of habit, sweeping her small living room with deliberate care, drawing comfort from these routines she controlled. That night, lying in bed, Stella couldn't help but wonder about the repercussions of her decision to report the violations. Would it lead to an investigation? If it did, would the changes prompted be enough to adjust the attitude held by the venue and people like Greg, ensuring the necessity of ordinary folks like herself? As she drifted to sleep, the sound of passing cars softened into the rhythms of dreams, reflecting waters of hope and new horizons. Tomorrow held the unknown, but for tonight, the satisfaction of speaking up suffused her rest. In its quiet, powerful way, her voice, among others yet unheard, had challenged events to realign, potentially averting unseen dangers awaiting beneath the glamour. Her courage, silently unfurled, promised to leave a lasting imprint regardless of notice or acclaim. Stella Gray, housekeeper and dreamer, had taken a step beyond pain into purpose, affirming a resolve to stand persistent and unyielding in the face of judgments, drawn together by her integrity where elegance failed. The next few days passed in relative quiet for Stella as she immersed herself in work and routine, navigating the corridors of the hotel where familiarity offered solace from the events at the aviation exhibit. Yet, beneath the surface of her daily chores, a quiet anticipation hummed, a mix of nerves and hopefulness for any word on her report. It wasn't long before her report bore fruit. On a drizzly Thursday morning, as she took a brief pause near a service entrance, her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. Stella glanced down, and her eyes widened in surprise. Social media feeds exploded with news about the aviation exhibit. Videos and articles circulated, dissecting the investigatory measures that had swept over the venue. It seemed the inspectors had acted swiftly. The local news channel had picked up on the story, broadcasting visuals of officials walking through the exhibit, noting numerous violations sealed behind the venue's gleaming facade. They cited safety failures much like the ones Stella had flagged: locked fire exits, inadequate safety logs, and eerily accurate were her observations on neglected checks. Viewers reacted with anger and disbelief, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation against the management's gross negligence. Within hours, the story had snowballed into a full-blown media uproar. Online platforms surged with impassioned discussions. People shared testimonials about feeling alienated in spaces not designed to welcome everyone, deepening conversations about privilege, safety, and the ability of the few to overlook the many. Stella's story struck a resonant chord. The exhibit's management scrambled, initially issuing a public apology that failed to satiate the growing public outcry. Their attempt to gloss over the seriousness of the breaches was too little too late. The damage was already done. The employee known as Greg, whose disdainful treatment of Stella had sparked a personal sting and subsequent scrutiny, was placed on suspension. The venue's police stumbled under the public's insistence for accountability. Officials declared the facility temporarily closed, fines levied, and a comprehensive internal review demanded by authorities. Chatter about potential criminal charges regarding regulatory violations threaded through discussions, pressuring stakeholders to confront their part in the oversight. Back in her modest apartment, Stella found her inbox laden with messages from strangers and colleagues alike. Emails and social media comments poured in, an overwhelming chorus of gratitude and solidarity. She was praised for her courage and commended for safeguarding not only lives but character against indifferent impunities. Stories mirrored hers, reflections of similar experiences from individuals who too had been made to feel invisible or irrelevant in spaces of opulence. They shared tales of rejection, underscoring a common anonymity that had, thanks to Stella, begun to carve pathways for collective assertion against such systematic arrogance. The community's embrace empowered Stella like never before. Her courage had become a rallying point, spurring dialogue, sparking empowerment, inviting collaboration among those unseen yet invaluable. In breaking the veneer of her individual silence, she had offered many the courage to speak, voices rising harmonious where one had stood alone. Her phone rang one evening, disrupting a quiet that cloaked her small home in contentment. The number was unfamiliar, making her hesitant for a beat before she answered, curiosity mingling with the caution ingrained after her recent acclaim. "Is this Stella Gray?" a warm voice asked, adding assurance to the inquiry. "Yes, speaking," Stella replied, trying to keep her wits about her. "This is Kara Thompson, a journalist with the local newspaper. I'm calling to commend your bravery in coming forward and to ask if you'd be willing to share your experiences for an article on public heroism. Your story has inspired many, and we believe it deserves to be heard." Stella pondered the invitation, accustomed to sitting in spaces where she remained unseen rather than at the forefront. However, there was a certain power her voice now held, a tale that had reshaped safety and bred awareness. This moment could serve to reinforce the importance of speaking up and emphasize preserving every worker's dignity. "Thank you, Kara. I'd be happy to discuss this," Stella agreed, an unexpected but harmonious sense of purpose resonating within her. The decision was rooted in humility guided by the cyan strands she now held, her transformation into a beacon of quiet strength for many. The article highlighted Stella's journey from housekeeper to inadvertent whistleblower, underscoring the human element often lost amidst corporate prestige. Her story illuminated the essential roles individuals played, regardless of social strata, in maintaining integrity and safety. As comments flooded in, admiration layered upon recognition for Stella's courage as readers celebrated her modest act with far-reaching implications. Unbeknownst to her at the decision's outset, Stella's unwavering adherence to truth served as a catalyst for change far exceeding the momentary humiliation she had faced. Where a single scoff had tried to diminish her, it had instead spurred kinetic energy behind discipleship of knowledge and justice. The fire exit, once barred and padlocked, had transformed into an emblem of fortitude against classist barricades, an empowered message from Stella sent resolutely into the world. In the days following, Stella continued her work with renewed vigor, secure in the knowledge that her actions had truly mattered. Other quiet heroes stepped forward, inspired by her bold stand, each contributing to a newly awakened tapestry of shared resolve stretching across communities. Though simple in her demeanor, Stella had left an indelible imprint on all who heard her story, a light cone sweeping forward, erasing shadows, illuminating pathways for everyone who dared once more to dream just as she had dreamt of soaring skies. Her role evolved from an anonymous name on a label to an exemplar of courage, proof positive that regardless of outward simplicity, personal convictions held tremendous power in reshaping one's destined place amidst society's ever-shifting landscape. In the weeks following the media storm, the dust slowly settled from the shakedown at the Aviation exhibit. The venue remained closed for renovations, its management pledging compliance with safety standards following public and regulatory scrutiny. Passing by, people would stop to read the bold letters on temporary signs promising new safety initiatives and improved guest experience, unknowingly walking past the remnants of Stella Gray's quiet influence rocking foundational change. Each day life nudged Stella toward a stronger self-awareness, an evolving confidence that came from knowing her actions were not only justified but transformative. Her physique exuded a silent dignity absent of outward triumphalism but steeped in inner resilience affirmed rather than questioned. She returned to work with her usual grace, attending to her duties with renewed spirit, lifting sheets and dusting corners with invigorated hands led by the knowledge of her greater worth. Her co-workers, emboldened by her example, rallied around Stella with newfound respect and camaraderie, sharing brief exchanges about injustices faced and vowed collective strength stronger than prior silence dictated. That transformation echoed even broader when Stella received a post adorned with an official seal, a letter from a notable nonprofit advocating for workers' rights. Slitting the envelope open gingerly amidst bubbling curiosity, she read with care the invitation to share her story at their upcoming conference highlighting everyday heroes. The address resonated within Stella's heart, each word underscoring their gratitude for her vocal stand and penchant for courage. The recognition mirrored how an unexpected spotlight had manifested promise through harnessed fortitude. Stella considered the invitation thoughtfully over a cup of steaming tea in her cozy kitchen, weighing the intrusion of stepping once more into public narrative against the value she gleaned from shared experiences candidly expressed. Her story wasn't exclusively her own anymore. It belonged collectively to all those who had crossed similar thresholds and now sought paths illuminated by testimony transformed into tenacity. With resolve, she drafted a response accepting, a flutter of anticipation dancing along her chest as she sealed the envelope with quiet satisfaction. Her narrative had become a testament to the enduring power of integrity, a voice unsilenced by social stratification intent on muting authenticity. Time ebbed steadily into anticipation, and soon the day arrived when Stella stood at the entrance of the rented auditorium hosting the event. Though she still dressed with simplicity, a pinstripe dress beneath a warm cardigan, the air around her seemed charged with the promise instilled within communal energy. Sidling into the room, she nodded briefly to friends and supporters who whispered encouragements her way, faces mapped with hope grateful for representation rallying against presumption fostering fractious divisions. Among the crowd, Kara, the journalist who chronicled Stella's trial and triumphs, stood steadfast, offering friendly assurance in solidarity. As Stella ascended the makeshift stage set before rows of anticipating attendees, a hum of voices fizzled quietly. Collecting her thoughts, she breathed steadily, grounding herself in the absolute certainty ripened from convictions and newfound belonging. "Thank you," Stella began, her voice ringing clear across the waiting assembly. "For joining a journey we've started together alongside those who seek justice, safety, acknowledgement." She recounted her experiences briefly yet powerfully, the ridiculed daydream, the indifference starkly juxtaposing inquisitive earnestness, the decision driven by convictions not only right but righteous. Her words resonated deeply, evoking a shared sense of purpose uniting humble beginnings with grand visions. In relaying her journey, Stella spoke not merely of a disgrace turned triumph, but underlined the broader implications upon human spirit pinned beneath indifferent scrutiny, and how adversity molded allyship among individuals standing stronger, even despite societal distinctions. "They might try to overlook," Stella continued, letting her gaze sweep across the room. "But we shall remain steadfast, for our truths are worth championing, and our courage deserves not solitary reverence but collective assent toward integrity embraced." Her sincerity, the authenticity ringing unbounded by bureaucracy's stratums, prompted genuine applause that rolled across the crowd like a wave promising unity and reprieve from alienation forcefully impressed upon those perceived less deserving beneath riches' tall shadow. After her speech, Stella mingled with attendees, exchanging stories with others whose endurance mirrored hers. The movements exchanged between handshakes and kindly recollections detailed emotional truths affirming what she had long known. To inspire change required no wealth nor rank, rather, those elements steeled against societal imbalance. Returning to her apartment that evening, Stella swapped formal wear for comfortable attire, her apartment exuding warmth derived from gratitude shared among kindreds in intent. The world outside simmered into cozy quiet beneath the sunset's embrace, affirming her continued grace amidst soft laughter harmonizing against dusk's autumnal chorus. Later, a heartfelt letter arrived from the Aviation Authority, expressing gratitude not just for Stella's diligence but drawing attention to significant procedural adjustments her actions had encouraged, ensuring safety as mandated rather than decoratively portrayed. The moment of acknowledgement touched Stella deeply, reinforcing her place in collective consciousness rising to preserve integrity where opulence offered deafening indifference. One afternoon, while taking a contemplative walk, Stella crossed paths with the newly opened Aviation venue. Hooked on the glint of polished glass, she noticed new placards declaring expanded safety compliance seated upon modernized entranceways. Though the company extended apologies, Stella absorbed them quietly, satisfied more with substantive outcomes than situational regrets trailing after public defiance. The placard marked alterations made systemic through her assertions rather than faces unfamiliar or estranged. Returning homeward, she shared a cup of tea with fellow workers at a local cafe, a simple scene amid rippling change that exemplified skies once dreamed yet unknown of, the potent elixir nestled deeply within shared fortitude across thresholds oft drawn apart. As smiles swirled alongside the vapor of fragrant leaves, Stella marveled at the harmonious unity binding her journey woven across individual stories. It reaffirmed the quiet dignity with which she approached her life, never seeking status, but rather embodying resilience steeped in respect, each moment onward a testament to her reality echoed beyond visions ridge-bound yet unborn. She had courage, had it unyielding from whispered dismissals meant to downgrade her dreams worthy defiance. In embracing that, she soared on kindling winds, Stella Gray, hospitably bold, daringly radiant amid genuineness reviving where history often leaves unexplored. Her simple journey had woven connective tissue that resounded quietly yet intensely, through courage, a portrait in keystone triumph, enough distilling farthest flight's measure distinctly across windswept, ever-brightening horizons.